Over the last few months, we went through every available neurological case study, autopsy report, and brain imaging study ever conducted on history's most famous creative minds. Einstein, Picasso, Tesla, Virginia Woolf, Van Gogh, and many more. We cross-referenced them against modern brain scan data from living artists, writers, and musicians. We weren't expecting to find a pattern. We found three. One of them is so consistent that researchers have started calling it the creative signature. It appears in almost every case we examined, across centuries, across different fields, across cultures that had nothing to do with one another. By the end of this video, we'll show you what it is, why it exists, and what it might mean if you've ever felt like your own mind works too fast or too loud. The first place we looked was Einstein's brain. Literally, after his death in 1955, his brain was removed without his family's permission, which is its own dark story, and studied for decades. One finding stood out. His parietal lobe, the region involved in spatial reasoning and mathematical thinking, appeared unusually large and unusually shaped. Einstein famously said that he thought in images and physical sensations, not words. I rarely think in words at all. At first, that sounded like an isolated quirk. Until we found almost the exact same description, almost word for word, from a completely different person, working in a completely different field, separated by nearly 100 years. Nikola Tesla described being able to visualize entire machines in 3 dimensions inside his mind. He could examine every component, rotate it, test it, and even run the machine mentally for weeks, checking for wear and imperfections before ever building a physical prototype. Virginia Woolf described her novels arriving not as words, but as a wave, a rhythm she had to chase and translate. Beethoven, after losing his hearing, composed some of the most complex symphonies in history entirely inside his head. He could hear music that existed nowhere except inside his own mind. Different centuries, different professions, different senses. Visual, musical, verbal, but underneath all of them, the same pattern emerged. Information didn't arrive as language. It arrived as a complete experience, whole, instant, non-verbal. Their real work wasn't creating the idea. Their real work was translating it into something everyone else could understand. That discovery led us to the second pattern, and this one is much darker. Modern brain imaging studies using functional MRI have examined highly creative individuals while watching their brains in real time. Researchers repeatedly found something called default mode network hyperactivity. The default mode network is the system that becomes active when you're not focused on an external task. When you're daydreaming, remembering, imagining, letting your mind wander. For most people, this network becomes quieter when attention shifts to a specific task. But in highly creative individuals, it often doesn't shut down completely. It keeps running quietly in the background, which helps explain why so many creative people describe having dozens of ideas running simultaneously or struggling to switch their brains off. If you've ever experienced that, you're not alone. But there is a cost. Multiple studies have linked this same background activity with higher levels of anxiety, rumination, and repetitive thinking. The same mental engine that constantly generates new ideas also generates constant worries. It doesn't know the difference. Which brings us to the third and most surprising pattern. Across nearly every historical case we examined, the people who transformed this noisy mind into decades of extraordinary creative work, instead of being overwhelmed by it, all shared one habit. They built an external structure, a daily routine so consistent and sometimes so rigid that it almost seemed strange. Beethoven counted exactly 60 coffee beans for every cup. Tesla scheduled nearly every minute of his day. Even Picasso, despite the chaos of his personal life, maintained an almost monastic painting routine for more than 70 years. The pattern wasn't chaotic genius. The pattern was a loud, hyper-connected, endlessly active mind contained inside a disciplined external structure. Almost like a pressure valve, the chaos didn't disappear. It was directed. It went into the work because the rest of life remained remarkably controlled. If you've ever felt like your mind is too much, too many ideas, too much noise, too difficult to switch off, this pattern might be the missing piece. In the next video, we'll break down the actual daily routines of 5 creative geniuses, minute by minute. And one of those routines is so unusual that historians still debate whether it was real. Subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.